Welcome to the Fisherman's Favorite Podcast. We're sitting 4 deep today. I got Jace and Sam here, and then we got special guest Donnie O'Bert, and we're going to talk a little bit about what makes Captain Donnie, Captain Donnie.
There's deer in the meadow, frogs in the pond, a place up the river where the fish are getting long. Bass in the lilies, crappie in the reeds, walleye on the rocks and pike in the weeds. There's a fella down the road who's a real fishing man, give you a stringer for the frying pan. Northland, fish and tackle, fisherman's favorite, it's a fisherman's favorite.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in today. It's going to be a really exciting show. Before we get into it though, we want to talk a little bit about what we have going on. It's that time of year where everyone's planning their trip up north, so make sure to check out Northland's ice kits. We got a bunch of lake-specific kits that work great for Devil's Lake, Red Lake, Lake of the Woods, Rainy Lake, Mille Lacs, all those areas. So really good one-stop shop to get you stocked up for those kits. So available exclusively on our website. So make sure to check them out. But now let's get into the meat and potatoes of it. We got Captain Donnie aboard. Welcome.
What's going on, fellas?
We're before we started this, I could tell you were getting into the groove of this, Donnie. You're hearing yourself talk, and
yeah. It's I've spent some time in front of the camera before, normally with no clothes on. Just kidding. I don't know if you can use that.
Here, pull this a little closer too.
I like to keep things light and airy.
that's one thing that makes Donnie super fun to be in the boat with. I've heard only good things from his clients.
Well, I do like to keep things fun. I mean, you can't, if you're not having fun, then what's the point?
That's right.
No, I like to describe you as I met you for the first time last year. I went up to your place and went ice fishing. And I came back and I told people, Donnie's the guy that I met him for the first time in person that day. But after I was done fishing with him for 8 hours, I felt like I knew him for 10 years.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I take that as a compliment, actually. If you, I like to treat people like they're my old high school buddies. I mean, fishermen are pretty much the same everywhere you go. I mean, we're all in it for the same thing for the most part. So you already have that instant connection. A little bit of conversation, a little bit of poking around, and you can kind of figure out what makes a guy tick and find your common bond, and you go from there.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your history of fishing and where you got into fishing, because like we talked about Tom Wynn previously, you have a little bit of an unconventional path to where you are now. So where did Donnie grow up fishing? How did he kind of start fishing and doing all that stuff?
All right. So I grew up in Mora, Minnesota, which is an hour north of Twin Cities and about 20 minutes south of Mille Lacs. So I grew up fishing Mille Lacs. My dad was a big pike fisherman, so we spent, good grief, countless days pike fishing on Mille Lacs, in a Lund Mr. Pike 16. That's probably my earliest memories of fishing. We had a cabin in Cohasset, just down the road here. So we fished on the river some and some of the smaller lakes. So I did grow up fishing. And then I joined the Air Force and did that for some years, 6 years. And then I built skyscrapers and parking garages and water treatment plants, heavy commercial industrial concrete for 20 years. And, had boats and kind of casually fished. Into my 30s, my late 30s, I actually took muskie fishing very seriously. And if you guys have gone down that road, you know what a rabbit hole that is.
It can be a dark path.
Yeah, an expensive path. And then because of my life in construction, actually, is my shoulders started giving out. And one day I just kind of said, I'm gonna have to figure out walleye fishing. I came into walleye fishing kind of begrudgingly. I wanted to muskie fish until I couldn't anymore. And I kind of did. So one day I was just fed up at work. We were empty nesters at 42. And the opportunity to start guiding full time, it just kind of happened. It wasn't some grandiose plan. I came home from work mad about something and hooked onto my boat, and I said, I'm going up to Rainy Lake for 10 days. And when I came home, I had a job offer, and I said, I'm doing it. I sold the house, and I had to finagle a few conversations with my wife. Was not I would say was not immediately on board, but she did come around and has supported me magnificently. It's kind of just grown from there. Yeah.
Did you pick Rainy Lake for any reason? Did you fish there before, or was it just like throw a dart at the map and that's where it landed?
So I had spent a significant amount of time in Voyageurs National Park.
Okay.
So some of that time was on Kabetogama, some of it was on Namakan, and a little bit of it was on Rainy. The job offer came from a guide service on Rainy, and so I kind of stepped back and looked. Well, it's a really complex system. There's a lot. It's a tough fishery, actually. It doesn't fish like conventional walleye fisheries. And in my mind, I thought, well, if a guy wants some job security, you got to be able to do this where other people can't.
Yep.
And there's a steady flow of tourists because of the national park. So to me, all of those things kind of played into saying yes to the job offer. And we bought a house right on the shores of Rainy Lake there, and I'm kind of an all or nothing. I mean, you guys have known me for a little bit now. When I say I'm going to do something, it's everything I got. So I was either going to make it or go bankrupt. So we still got a little money in the bank.
You're still guiding.
still guiding. Yep.
So what were some of your biggest challenges getting into that first year guiding?
Okay. So my biggest challenges were, I went into it kind of with the thought that I was going to be a muskie and pike guide. I would be the guy within the business that took those trips, because I was not an experienced walleye angler. Like, I had one season of poking around the walleye world, and I learned pretty quickly that if you don't take walleye trips, you don't eat. So, a big part of the challenge for me was I was learning how to catch walleyes with customers in the boat. Yeah. So I was pretty good at navigating tough water. I'd done plenty of that and reading maps, and but man, as far as walleye fishing, it seemed that first season now looking back, I realize there's 7 or 8 very distinct patterns, over the course of a year.
Yeah.
And, going into it right away was pretty simple, because we were, pitching jigs and plastics. Well, I mean, if you've done any bass fishing or muskie or pike fishing, you can navigate shallow water and find warm water bays. And so all of that kind of played into my strengths. But as soon as those walleyes pushed out, man, it was a whole new world for me. And so it kind of felt like every time I had a technique kind of dialed, okay, I'm going out super confident, and you would go out and where you caught 80 yesterday, you'd catch 30, and then the next day you'd catch 15, and you hang on to what has been working instead of making the adjustment. All the other experienced guides were, I would call them and I'd say, hey man, I'm kind of getting my butt kicked here. And they're like, oh yeah, we're all over here now doing this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, so then you buy a bunch more stuff, and then learn another technique. Well, that happens over and over your first year. Now, as I go through the season, I have those first couple of days where the numbers start dipping, and I go, I know what's next. Yeah. Right? I have historical reference on this body of water. Okay. When this bite starts dipping, they're going over here. We're going to change a few things up, throw on some different technique, and away you go. And you're right back into them, where you don't struggle those 5 or 6 or 7 days of transition. Like, you see it in real time. the bite's dipping, they're moving. Time for something else.
Yep.
You know, so it's easier to make those adjustments.
I'm pretty sure you told me this before, but do you keep like a record of the season? And
I keep over 28s. I keep track of.
Okay.
Otherwise, I will tell you an interesting story about using the clicker. You know, I know a lot of walleye guys. They love that clicker. And what I can tell you from a guide's perspective is all the clicker does is steal joy. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is I can have, you know, a group out and we catch 60 walleyes, right? And we're high-fiving and hugs and they just think it's the greatest day ever.
Yep.
And you get to the resort and drop them off and, you know, they're chatting with people at the bar or the cleaning shack or the gas dock and, you know, those people caught 80.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden your people that caught 60, they kind of feel like they got cheated a little.
Yeah.
The clicker is for the captain's pride.
Yeah.
The clicker does. I truly believe the clicker does nothing for your customers. Mm-hmm. You know, they if you catch 60 walleyes at the end of the day, you come in, you go, oh, we probably caught 82.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really. The only thing I believe the only thing the clicker does is it steals joy and happiness from your customers.
What I've learned from people, and I'm guilty of it myself, but I also take into account when people. You get the guy that goes out there and he catches 100 fish every time he goes out there. And what I've come to realize when you actually count and use the clicker,
it's probably 62.
yeah. Well, you might catch 20.
Sure.
But it felt like 100 because it was so much fun.
Yeah.
And so when a guy goes out and tells you he caught 100 and you're like, no, I was just out there, you know, like a local lake around here. No
Sure.
way you caught 100. But I was like, I bet, you know, I respect that because the fishing was good.
Sure.
And you had 100 fish worth of fun, even though you might only caught 10.
100 fish experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. 100 fish days do happen. And on rainy day, actually, it's not that infrequent.
Yeah.
But you don't have to catch 100 to have a good time. You don't have to catch 100 to have an amazing memory.
Well, and that was one thing I was going to kind of transition on is when you said, you know, you're fresh to walleye fishing and you started guiding. I bet 1 year fishing every day on Rainy Lake, you gain the knowledge of fishing for 10 years
Sure.
once a week on any other
Sure.
body in
Sure.
Minnesota because you got in front of that many walleyes, right?
Sure. So that's actually easy math to figure out, right? So your neighbor Dave, he's got 10 years experience. He fishes every other weekend all summer. That's 13 weekends. That's 26 days. I run 275 trips a year. I have 10 years worth of neighbor Dave's experience in one season.
Yeah.
On top of that, I don't necessarily spend time every day looking for fish. I know where I left them yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, well, you know, with this wind blown point, the wind hasn't changed. I know they're there. We don't necessarily have to scan. I mean, I'm gonna drive right to them.
Yeah.
Here we go. You know, so you save some time that way too. But yeah, the experience you gain doing it every day. I mean, just the stuff you learn by accident,
Right.
you know, takes people years to learn. So it is pretty fast learning curve.
And how many years do you have under your belt now?
6 years full time.
So 60 Dave years.
Yes, yeah,
60
yeah.
days,
Dave's his boat's down to the grandkids already. Yeah,
Yeah, shout out Dave.
shout out to Dave. You were a good mentor.
So
The number of fish that you catch in a day is also, you know, dependent on the day, like that day that you're out there, the time of the year, and you might only catch 20 that day, but you caught your biggest walleye of the day or your life.
Sure.
And that's different than catching 80 to 100.
Sure. Oh yeah, for sure. Like the goal's not 100 every day. The goal. Let me just tell you an interesting maybe viewpoint. So here's the question I get asked probably more than any is, well, when's the best time to come up there? Mm-hmm. And honestly, that question kind of drives me a little bit nuts. Like it almost insinuates that you're taking same money when the opportunities are less.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, so I always counter that question of when's the best time to come up with how do you want to catch them? Or is there a technique that you would prefer to get better at or learn about? You know, I start the spring and we're throwing, sometimes throwing stick baits in 2 feet of water.
Yeah.
And catching walleyes. And, then we're pitching jigs and plastics or pitching jigs and live bait. And, then we might be, trolling, rumble shads on spinning gear. And then, there's so many different techniques that I can kind of get somebody, well, geez, I've never done it this way. You can catch walleyes doing that? And you're like, yeah, okay, come up in June, and I'll show you. And so you can kind of direct somebody to what fits their definition of the best. Like the best is a question in the fishing industry that drives me crazy because, me and Charlie might do the best, in my opinion, might not work for how Charlie fishes or how Sam fishes. So when people use that phrase, well, what's the best? Well, the best is an objective way to look at things.
Yep.
I'd rather catch 10 pitching jigs and plastics than 100 trolling cranks.
I do love pitching jigs and plastics.
I think the same thing goes for people that want to catch a couple or a 28 plus compared to 40, 2 to 3 pounders too.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Which, speaking of big fish, you got some tankers up there too.
Yeah, Rainy Lake is I don't want to say it's a sleeper, but it's, what's crazy is it's relatively unknown. Like, if you were to ask most walleye anglers, hey, give me your 5, best walleye fisheries, I'm not entirely convinced Rainy Lake is brought up on a real regular basis. And
I would say rarely.
Rarely. I would agree with rarely. And what I think is it's an hour too far. So if you were to say, like, well, the bulk of walleye fishermen live in the Twin Cities, that's mathematically, that's probably accurate. So you look at the craziest guys and you get 2 or 3 of them in a truck, you can day trip Vermilion, and you can day trip Leech, and you can day trip Winnie. You cannot day trip Rainy. It's just too far.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's what keeps it off of people's radar. You can go to Cabotogama and Namakan. It's the same scenery. It's similar fishing, and it's an hour closer.
Right.
So I think when people start dipping their toes into the Canadian shield waters that are within Minnesota, they just stop a little short of Rainy, and I think it goes unnoticed.
And the flip side of it is the Lake of the Woods has so much hype around it too.
Yep.
That, and what I've come to realize about Rainy is, so you got the U.S. side of Lake of the Woods is just like, more looks like, fish is different, but more looks like Mille Lacs. It's kind of wide open.
Sure.
But you get up into Gussie country of Sioux Narrows, Kenora, and it gets beautiful. But like for Bemidji up here, that's looking at 3-4 hours worth of drive.
Sure.
You can get into that type of fishing on Rainy right at the border.
Yeah.
You don't have to go the extra 2 hours. So
the U.S. side of Rainy is Canadian Shield.
Yep.
I would say that the U.S. side of Lake of the Woods is a bowl.
Yeah.
So you can get into that shield type structure and reefs and rock piles and points and stuff 5 minutes out of town. I mean, it's
right there.
Was your first experience on Rainy with me on the snowmobiles?
I think so. I don't think I'd ever been there previously.
Sam is an addict now.
I said it. I was like, again, because I've been up to the north end of Lake of the Woods, and I just love it up there. And
sure.
Like I tell my buddies, like, oh, we got to plan a trip, and then I went up there with you, and I'm like, you could day trip that from Bemidji.
From Bemidji, you absolutely.
And I'm
could.
like, what have I been doing for the last 10 years in Bemidji, not going there?
Well, now you know.
Now I know.
Now you know. Charlie's been up with me a few times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
What's your favorite part about Rainy Lake?
My favorite part of Rainy Lake, God dang, it's hard to not say giant walleyes. Aside from, actually, I would say elite caliber species of fish, of 5 or 6 different species. Yep. Aside from that, just the remoteness of it, you just don't have to go that far, and you don't see very many boats. It's, it's Nick Linder and Charlie came and filmed with me last summer, and we probably filmed for 8 or 9 hours, and we saw one boat. I mean, one boat. It's I've always kind of felt like, in the park, and then again on the Canadian side, for the most part, there are very few cabins. You don't. This guy's not running a wood chipper, on a Saturday morning. I mean, it's you blast out of town either east or north, and it's as God intended. The landscape, the nature. I mean, we see wolves and we see bears and an occasional moose and lots of whitetails, and I mean, it's you're one with nature. You never feel like you're fishing in someone's backyard, if that makes sense to you. It's wild.
Yeah, the scenery is just crazy. Like, you could just sit back and ride in the back of the boat and just look around. Like when we were up there, you, me, and Nick, we were catching them pretty good, doing some hooting and hollering, and on any other body of water, you'd have like boats just coming in on us, but we didn't have to worry about. We couldn't see anyone in any direction.
Yeah, it's wild. You kind of drive where I always have an idea in my head where I want to go, and it's usually around Piles Islands and stuff, and you finally come around the last point where you can see where you want to fish. And as a fisherman, you always have this, God, I hope there's nobody sitting there. There's never somebody sitting there. And the funny part is, if somebody is sitting there, it's another guide that I know.
Yeah.
So I'll pull up and, hey, are you whacking them, or so it's pretty wild.
So Donnie, we talk about the scenery of Rainy Lake and why you love it, but tell the listeners about this loop movement of Rainy Lake that's different than, say, if a client or someone would drive across the border and want to fish Rainy Lake on the Canadian side.
Okay. So maybe some folks don't even know.
Right.
Rainy Lake is a border water that is 70-ish% in Ontario and 30% in the United States. Now, we are able to perform a loop movement is the legal term for what we do. So when you do a loop movement, there are no reporting requirements. So what that means is we can depart the United States, loop into Ontario for recreational purposes, and loop back down into the United States if we never touch land and if we do not rendezvous with any other boats. There are no reporting requirements. We don't have to let Ontario know we were there, and we are not required to report back into the United States. So in some instances, that is a lot less hassle than, say, driving across like an actual border checkpoint, where you may need more documents and background searches and so on and so forth. So there is a little bit of a caveat written into the law that a loop movement is permitted with no reporting necessary.
Yeah, and I think that's a good reason to go with the guide. Like, if you don't know, it's still border. Like, you don't want to mess with any of that stuff.
Yeah. You want to know. You want to know what you're doing. There's
anchoring counts as touching land, like stuff like that.
Anchoring counts as touching land. That's true. I've been told by an authority that spot lock is considered, and so I actually argued that one. I said, well, the definition says I'm required to be underway. Well, what is the definition of underway? Is my prop spinning? Is that underway?
Yeah, I
think so. So on spot lock, if my prop is spinning, I would think, therefore, technically, I would be underway.
Yeah.
So that one is that officer might have been having a bad day, but I will say, for the most part, every time I've been checked by Ontario authorities, they are extremely professional, polite. I've never had a problem. One thing, if you're going to do this on your own, make sure you know what's required in your boat. There are a few items you have to have in your boat that are not required by Minnesota. So make sure you look into that, or honestly shoot me a message on Facebook Messenger if you want, and I'll fill you in real quick. It's just a couple simple items and can be picked up at most outdoor stores on the border.
Yep. A few items you're not permitted in the boat.
Yeah. Yes. No alcohol.
Yep.
No alcohol, and that's actually on the ice too.
Yep.
A lot of people don't know that. Ontario has a zero alcohol policy when you're on the water, and that it does include ice fishing.
Yep. And that's even like canned start away. You can't even have it there, right?
You don't even want to have an empty stuffed in a rod locker or something to that effect. That's make sure your boat is free and clear before you cross the border. Yep.
Now that whole loop movement also changes for ice too, right?
Yes. Now, yes, because you can walk on ice. Ice is considered land. So there are a couple of options. If you want to cross in the winter, you can drive across. Once you drive across, you're legally in the country. You can do whatever. You can get a remote border crossing pass ahead of time, and at that point you can cross, like say we want to run snowmobiles up like we did, Sam.
Yep.
We both have remote border crossing. We can leave right from my house, up and over, go fish all day, come back, and when we come back, then we do have to report we're back in the United States on the CBP app, on the Roam app, which is super simple to do. The other thing you can do is call Can Pass, which is a little more time consuming. You actually snowmobile right up to the border in the middle of the lake and stop, call Can Pass, and give them your passport number, your snowmobile registration number. They do a quick little check. They give you a confirmation number. You write that down, put it in. That way, if you get stopped, you can prove, yep, I reported in. Same thing on the way back, then back to the Roam app. So there's a little more to it, but it's actually, once you kind of understand it, it's pretty simple.
And these are some of the things that might keep people from coming to Rainy Lake because they're kind of worried about figuring out all these different things.
Yeah, nobody wants to have their boat or snowmobiles taken or go to jail or have to go to court in a foreign country. That's but yeah, for sure, it's definitely a hindrance or a roadblock or a hurdle to fishing the Canadian side of Rainy Lake.
But it's definitely worth it.
I think so. I think history would prove that it's worth the time and effort spent.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bait is another hiccup, right?
Yep.
So what are the current bait rules?
Okay, open water. Maybe year round. No, I believe that no biological bait can cross the border. So no live, no frozen, no preserved. I've even heard of a guy with some attractant that got stopped.
Mm-hmm. Really?
And because it's made with biological material. Yeah. So the best bet with bait is to either be all artificial or stop on the Canadian side at a bait shop, buy the bait you want to use and save your receipt.
Gotcha.
Take a picture of it on your phone and try to physically save the receipt. I've been stopped before, and the receipt, of course, blew away in a snowstorm, and I was able to show them the picture of the receipt on my phone, and that was good enough for that officer at that given time.
Yeah. Yep. So when it comes to open water, are you fishing mainly plastics then?
I fish a lot of plastics. We start the year throwing stick baits, and then we'll go to pitching jigs and plastics to wind-blown rock piles or wind-blown points. And then from there, I go to a real shallow trolling pattern on spinning gear, which is I use a ton of rumble bugs and rumble shiners, like maybe for a month or 6 weeks straight. And those are typically big number days. Those fish have just kind of pushed out, to those first points or the weed edges. If you can, we don't have a ton of weeds on Rainy Lake, but boy, if you can find a good cabbage edge and 6 to 9 feet of water with a little wind cooking in there. Holy moly. You can't keep three rods and rod holders. I mean, they're constantly just folding over. From there I'll go to trolling. Sometimes I'll troll deeper baits, as we're progressing into late July and August. I'm using live scope and pitching jigs and plastics. A lot of the Northland eye candies. One of the real secrets here, and I don't know if a lot of people understand this, they float. So I'm turning my Garmin and hey Brenda, there's 2 big walleyes at 47 feet here, and if they can just drift that bait in, those walleyes just crush it because it hangs horizontal. It doesn't nose bomb down. It's a lot of times I like to have people pitch past, close the bail, watch it drop, and then we close the bail and just let it kind of pendulum.
Yeah.
Over those, and they see it coming, and it's just you're like, I'm like, Brenda, close your bail and hold on, and they just, it's crazy. When you guys first sent me those the prototypes, the fact that it floated, just, that's just, it's such an advantageous way to use forward-facing sonar, because you are constantly just putting jig heads on foreheads. There's no wasted time.
Right.
Like, okay, Bill here, Brenda there, and you're just, so I'll run that program, July and August, maybe a week or 2 into September. I will pull crankbaits on snap weights. Sometimes people don't, honestly, sometimes people are on vacation. They want to put their feet up and drive around. Yeah. So in that scenario, I'm pulling crankbaits. I really like the Rumblebee. You guys, we've done some videos with them. Rods in the rod holders and snap weights on, and cruise rock piles and catch fish. Sometimes what we do is more based on what the customer wants to do than what I want to do. Yeah. But there's so many different patterns, throughout the year. It's just, it never gets old. Every day is a new adventure.
Yeah, and sometimes we're there to, try to catch fish on one way, but the fish don't want it that way. Like, we had to put the Rumblebees on, and that one day we were out there, and then you cracked that 27-incher.
Yeah. We were actually on our way in.
Yeah.
We had kind of filmed the whole deal, and we caught a lot of fish, but no bigs. I remember I was like, God dang it, no bigs.
Yeah.
And we were coming in, and we were just blowing by this reef that I troll a lot, and I said, God dang, guys, let's put these Rumblebees on snap weights and just give it one pass. And geez, I bet what do you think we went 30 feet in that rod?
No.
It just folded over. I said, oh, that's a good one. When the rod tip ticks the boat, that's a good fish.
Yeah.
That's almost always a real good fish. Yeah.
Donnie, talk a little bit about your fall. I know you transitioned from walleyes to another species that Rainey might not be super well known for, but there's giants in it.
Okay. Yeah. So what happens in the fall with Rainy Lake walleyes is they become a little bit temperamental. So what I mean by that is we're typically still reef fishing at that point. So, there's a million rock reefs, and you just kind of bump from reef to reef until you mark some. And all right, let's target these guys for a little bit. So in that fall time, a lot of the time, you can absolutely whale on them one day, and go to the same reefs the next day and not even mark a fish. They're just gone. And it's kind of my opinion that they're feeding on smelt. And a lot of the reefs I fish are adjacent to or very near the deep water basin. And I'm talking the abyss. And in my mind, I guess I don't know for sure. We always talk in these absolutes like it's fact, but I think the walleyes dip off the rocks and they are gorging on smelt in the abyss. Yeah. So like there's almost no way to target them. There's almost no way to find them.
Yeah.
Have
you ever tried?
I haven't because it's different with customers.
Yeah.
We need to be on fish.
Yeah, you can't spend all day.
We're not gonna. Yeah, right. So So when you go from, real good days with numbers of big fish to not even marking a fish, it is good to have a backup plan. And, a lot of those days will be 2 to 3 hours into it. And I'm sure I look like a lunatic to my customers, just nothing, nothing, so it's just reef to reef. And like you search 2 or 3 of them and you're like, they boogied. So I will say, guys, we can grind this out. It's, from what I'm seeing, it's probably going to be a really, really tough day walleye fishing, or we can try to go catch some of the infamous Rainy Lake crappies. And the track record with crappies on Rainy Lake is phenomenal. I mean, they are big and they're aggressive, and you can almost always get some. If you have a good checklist of spots, they're gonna be in one of 5 or 6 places. And so, most people, they're like, wow, we really wanted to catch walleyes, but most people will trust you. Like, hey, if you think that's our best option, then I say, oh, let's button down your hats, boys and girls. We're going for a ride, and it's a jaunt. It's 25, 30 miles from where I walleye fish to where I crappie fish. So, but we'll make the run, and usually we beat them up pretty good. Yep.
They're happy by the end of the day when they have a 14 incher.
Dude, if you guys have never seen or targeted these crappies, it's pretty insane. I mean, it's like, I would say the average fish we box is 12 to 13 inches. And I mean, I think they're a subspecies. They're so aggressive. Like, I watch you guys interview, good panfish guys, and clearly they're fishing for pressured fish. I'm using a 1/8 ounce fireball, short shank, and it's like, if it's windy at all or real overcast, most of the time you can set right on them. If it's bluebird skies and calm, you just 30 feet off them and pitch to them. And if you can get a jig anywhere near these fish, they are racing for it, and you're watching it all happen in real time. It's just, people are blown away. We all sit here like live scope is no big deal, or because you're all in the industry. Yeah. Your average guide customer has never seen one, has probably not even seen it on YouTube.
Right.
They're blown away. Like, no, pull it away from that fish, Bill. That's just a 9-incher. Yeah. The one under it. That's the one. They're like, they're shocked at where technology is.
It's pretty cool.
And most people just like getting bit,
Yes. Yeah. Hook sets.
Us 3 here are, I'd say we're multi-species anglers, but we really also enjoy catching bass. And it always, we deal with a lot of like hardcore walleye guys. It's all they fish for.
Sure.
And, walleyes have kind of the mystique and the special thing, but it always enjoys me when you get those hardcore walleye guys that were like, oh yeah, I got on a school of bass. Boy, were they fun, man. Oh, yeah. They fight hard, and it's like, yeah, because you just like getting bit.
Yeah.
Like, so sometimes it's better to just go after the best bite than to hit the mystique.
Yeah, I will tell you, last winter, scouting. Have you guys ever caught smallies through the ice?
Yeah. A couple times.
It's a riot. Yeah. So
they try to jump sometimes.
Yeah. You hear them thunk on the bottom of the ice. We found this crazy midday bite. Our walleye bite that day in particular, it slowed, and so I jumped on my snowmobile. I said, I'm gonna just drill a couple other reefs and just see if there's fish there, and I drilled one out. I drilled 5 or 6 holes in this. This reef is probably the size of 2 school buses next to each other. I mean, it's tiny, and it's deep abyss all the way around it. And I was like, I threw my live scope down. Oh my gosh! And I thought they were walleyes. And I had a rod in the back of my snowmobile. No bait bucket, no nothing. I'm like, well, there's a spoon on there. I dropped that thing down, and like 8 smallies just, like, oh my gosh. Well, I didn't know they were smallies, I got one up through the hole, and I probably sat there for an hour just laughing, catching smallies, 50 miles from the nearest human, just having a riot all by myself.
That's awesome.
They fight hard, and they do try to jump. We're not joking. One of the first ones I caught, I hooked into it, and I'm like, yeah. And I can feel my line on the bottom of the ice going like he's dogging me away. And then all of a sudden I'm like, what is happening? And all of a sudden it went slack.
Sure.
He tried to jump and shake it off and hit the bottom of the ice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, smallies are a riot. And if smallies are your thing, Rainy Lakes is a great destination. I mean, we have a really big, smallmouth tournament up there every year, the International Falls tournament. The smallie fishing is incredible, Might be worth a drive.
Might be worth the drive. That's enough open water talk, I think.
Yeah, so
let's talk ice. Yeah. This episode's going to be launching right around the time, Donnie, you figured you're going to be on the ice on Rainy Lake.
Yeah, so we, for those of you that don't know, Rainy Lake is a flowage. So we are typically a few weeks behind the rest of the state, which actually works out. There are advantages to that. So late December and most of January is our early ice. Yeah. So when bites are typically slowing down in some of the more notorious first ice locations, because they're 6 weeks into it, we're on first ice. Yeah. And so it makes a real nice transition. If you're thinking like, well, I've been here for 3 weeks and it's really was excellent and has slowed down, there are other places in the state you can go that are still on the first ice style or type of bite with aggressive fish. Yep.
So I think it was early this last summer, you were telling me that, you might get this vehicle, but to keep it a secret. And
you didn't believe me.
I didn't believe you. And then like a couple of months later, you just get a picture sent over of this Sherp.
Yeah.
So tell us the story about how you decided to get 2 of those, I believe.
Yeah. We purchased 2 Sherps, a 2021 and a 2023. How the Sherp came about was I spent a lot of time last winter exploring the furthest nether regions of Rainy Lake. Like, you would have to be a madman to go this far. And I've always kind of had in the back of my head, like, well, this is where I go in the spring, summer, and fall. Why wouldn't the fishing be phenomenal in the winter? Mm-hmm. And I've never even heard of anybody going out that far in the winter. So myself and a buddy of mine by the name of Joe, we started snowmobiling it, and it was brutal. I mean, it was a lot of times took us, we were 7 miles an hour because of the amount of snow and drifting, and it was brutal. But the bite we found was next level. I mean, it was run out of bait style days, like over and over again, where we were just so blown away with the bite that, now as a guide, my natural transition is, okay, how can I get customers here? Mm-hmm. And I think if you were to continue we're going to run them on snowmobiles, as a business owner, you have to limit liability. Yeah. And not everybody can run a snowmobile 30 miles when it's 30 below zero. Not everybody wants to. You'd have to be nuts. Yeah. I mean, you'd have to
be Donnie.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes. So we kind of started just looking like, oh God, what other options are there? So, we looked at snow bears and they float. We kind of thought that might be the way we go. And then we the problem that we had with the snow bears is, one, they're not great in slush. And Rainy is notorious for awful slush. Not every year, but some years. I mean, some years it's unbelievably bad. So I thought, well, all right, they're not good in slush. You got to limit liabilities. We can't really take snowmobiles. And we discovered the Sherp machine kind of by accident. A county rescue team had one. And I just stumbled across a video of them breaking through the ice and crawling back out. And I thought, holy moly, that's an unbelievable ability to break through and be able to crawl back out with zero assistance. I thought that's heated cab, heated passenger area, can haul 8 people. I know the more we looked at them, the more we said, this is it. I mean, this is the machine that makes the most sense for what we're trying to do. So we agreed that we would go halves on one and start a new guide business, doing ultra remote adventure style ice fishing trips. Mm-hmm. And we both kind of said, yeah, well, we'll go halves on one. I mean, they're pretty expensive. So we went our separate ways for a week, and we were chatting, and I said, Joe, I hate to say it, but I think we need 2. And he said, I actually kind of been thinking about that myself, and because where we go, there's nobody. If we were to just buy one machine, get customers out, and that machine for some reason were to break down, there's nobody. Nobody's coming by. I mean, we saw more timber wolves last year than people. Yeah. We saw one snowmobile track. I mean, there's nobody. And so the more we kind of hashed out how we were going to do this, we kind of said, we got to have 2. And the only thing going to pull a Sherp out of a problem is probably another Sherp. So we did end up buying 2. And now we're just patiently waiting ice. Actually, Sherp number 2 is on the ice today.
Wow. Is it?
Really? Yeah. Joe trailered one probably 50 miles north of I Falls, just looking for ice. Yeah. And he sent me a couple pictures. They're out. So he found what we did find is 5 inches of ice will hold it, 4 will not.
But I think kind of the cool thing about the Sherp is, like you said, it's the ultimate vehicle for you. It does all these things, thin ice, can crawl out of ice, can crawl a bunch of people, haul a bunch of people. But the problem with it is it comes with the price tag. So it really doesn't make sense unless you're running a business like you. But it's also a really cool opportunity. Like, we all wanted to say we wanted to ride in the Sherp. So now you're kind of...
We're waiting for Donnie's invite.
You're kind of selling a Sherp ride with some bonus fishing now, too.
Yeah. There definitely is that aspect to it where... you always as a guide, you focus so hard on putting people on fish that sometimes you do lose sight of the fact that the adventure is part of it.
For sure.
And for some people, we're in the industry, so we take the fishing part so serious that sometimes you forget the adventure is where it's at for some people. My first year guiding, I learned a lesson that you don't want to steal somebody's vacation day by being a grumpy guide, right? Because you can't get them on fish, or the fish won't cooperate or whatever. So the adventure, the boat ride, the Sherp ride, all of that stuff adds up from the customer's point of view. So the Sherp ride, I mean, why wouldn't it be the super cool part of the trip? We'll probably catch some fish. Yeah. Blame the angler if you miss a few. We always take the fishing part so serious, probably infinitely more serious than the customers do.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, I think that's like a huge part of it, because like I talked about the first time I went with you, and after I was done, I felt like I knew you for 10 years. You're my buddy at that point.
Yeah, we had a good day.
Why wouldn't I come back the next time? And sure. I think even you were like, I was hoping the fishing would be a little bit better. I was like, the fishing was great. The company was great. We lost our bait and had to go in a little early. But again, we had caught plenty of fish by then, and I was able to hit the road and get home. So I think like you said, the creating the experience is so important, so much more important than the exact quality of the fishing. I know we've had other guides that are Northland staff that they said they learned very early on. They had a rough day. They caught like 2 or 3 walleyes, and he goes, "I'm sorry, guys. Like, this is the worst day of guiding I've ever had." And the customer goes, "What? Really? That was the best day of walleye fishing I've ever had in my life." So it's all
perspective,
relative. You know, they're just happy to catch a walleye.
Yeah, most customers are happy to not be pounding nails or hauling sheetrock or sitting in a cubicle somewhere. Yeah. For most people, that's enough. Yeah. You know,
they're happy to be on the lake.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
So ice guiding is a little different than open water guiding. Did you start ice guiding up there right away, or is that something that kind of came on through your time spent up there?
I didn't actually. The first winter, I went back to Mora, and went back to Union Construction, and I made it about 6 weeks. And I had gotten a few calls about some ice trips, and I was thinking, geez, I'm not really set up for it. I don't have piles of flashers, and my snowmobiles are from the mid '90s. Yeah. And I just in my mind, everything's got to be top shelf. And I tried going back to construction, and I just couldn't do it. I think the walleyes missed me. So.
Or was it the other way around?
Yeah, it might have been the other way around. So I just said, you know what, I'm going for it. And so that first winter I did, I don't know, enough to, keep the wolves at the door. And then, we started getting more aggressive about advertising winter trips, and it just kind of grew to, mostly it's customers I have in the summer. Yeah. That, a lot of my customers are from Colorado and Kansas City and, from all over the country. And these are areas that don't ice fish. So they have such a good time in the boat that, you just a little bit of boat conversation about ice fishing, and they're so intrigued that, we got to come back and see what this is all about, so. Being now that I'm 6 years in, I'm almost 100% return customers, and that's winter and summer. I mean, it's almost impossible even to get into my book. It's kind of crazy. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's kind of how the ice guiding came about. I just didn't want to shovel concrete anymore. You guys can't. You don't blame me for that, do you?
No, not one bit.
I shoveled enough concrete,
and the walleyes missed you.
Me. Yeah. Now, you guys haven't even touched on the pike bite I had last winter.
Get into the pike. How did that come about? Tell people. Do you know your pike stats off the top of your head from last winter?
Oh yeah.
Let's hear the pike stats.
Yeah. So 43 over 40. The biggest last year for a customer, I believe, was a 46. The heaviest was a 44. That was as big around as my chest. And I did not fish in March.
All those pike are through the ice?
Yes. Yeah, all through the ice. Yeah. So last year, remember I said I did a bunch of exploring. I also needed some income. So I thought I had grown up tip-up fishing. And I've done, now I'd say I probably have walleye fished more, but for most of my adult life, my ice fishing was tip-up fishing. And so I have a real passion for big pike through the ice, and so does my good buddy Trent. And so we had kind of developed this bite. It's hard to describe. It's slack water on a river system dumping into a big lake. And we knew that big pike were in the area, and we were drilling one day and dropping a bait down, and I noticed it didn't move, and the baits always swing downstream. And I thought, wow, that's interesting, slack water. Yeah. And so what I've learned sturgeon fishing over the years is the biggest fish do not fight current. Okay, so I think to myself, well, I wonder if that applies to big pike.
Yeah.
Turns out it does. So, you know, the craziest stat. So I kind of publicly announced on Facebook, I'm going to try to catch 40 over 40 in one season. And like that thing gained momentum like crazy. I had people messaging me from anywhere in the world you catch pike. I was getting messages. It was bonkers how many people were tuned into this thing. And so, you know, daily I would put out, you know, hey, pile of them to 39, no 40s or whatever. So I kept kind of a live time counter going on Facebook. And we ended up, I fished maybe a little bit in December, some in January, some in February. And then I had pre-booked crappie trips, so I couldn't continue the pike run. But we ended up at 43 over 40.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Impressive. Northland Predator rigs, perchy perch blades with the 1/0 hooks.
There you go.
And you're planning to do that again this year?
I am not, but my partner on that bite, Captain Trent, is going to run the pike trips.
Sweet.
So, I mean, if anybody's looking to do a tip-up pike trip, you know, you can message me directly. I'll shoot you right over to Trent, and he'll get you set up.
Possibly a 40-incher.
Oh, golly, I have an affliction for big pike. They're just special to me. Pike over 40 I think they're a different critter.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge fish.
Especially through the ice.
Yeah.
Through a 10-inch hole.
Yeah, 10-inch hole. Yep.
Yeah.
And you're kind of right too about the worldwide breadth of pike. Like some of the most viral fishing videos, I feel like are pike, because pike are crazy huge in Europe.
Oh,
and
yeah.
People just love it. They eat them up. You know, here I think sometimes you take it for granted. And
yes.
You're like, just another
Lots of pike.
snot rocket,
Yes,
slime ball.
yeah.
But
yeah,
love big pike.
the over 40s are they're special fish. They're even so I'll tell you, I do take a lot of what I would consider walleye snobs fishing. Mm-hmm. And I mean, these are the type of guys that curse pike.
Yeah.
They're all smiling when they've got a 40 running. Every one of them.
It's the largemouth bass effect. It's getting bit by a big fish that pulls.
Yes. Yeah. The Ferrari of the water. Yeah.
Yep. Back to big walleyes. What are some of your, and these can be like clients catching them, but what are some of your biggest ice walleyes up on Rainy?
Oh, you know, early ice on Rainy is you actually have pretty good shot at a 30. I've had several crest the 30 mark. Lot of fish over 28. You know, maybe one of the differences between Rainy and some of the other fisheries is in the winter, you know, we're probably not going to catch bucketfuls. Mm-hmm. You know, you might only get 10, 15 bites, but none of those bites will be, a very small percentage of those bites will be saugers. Yeah. It's really walleye heavy. And every hook set has a chance to be a really big walleye.
Well, and what I noticed when I went up with you is we still caught bucketfuls, just the buckets filled faster with less fish. They're all quality fish. I was really impressed by the size.
Yeah,
when we went up there, because it was good numbers.
It was. It
wasn't like trophy hunting. It was good numbers, but you know, we were up there trying to get some nice photos and stuff too, and all those just beautiful photo fish.
Yeah. So our forage base is I think it's ridiculous. I mean, you know, we catch 17 inchers that you look at them and you have to measure them 3 times. Like, no way, that's a 17, you know? Yeah. And I have the biggest walleye I've seen where we go was a 32 last year. And it was an absolute behemoth. I mean, it was a freak of nature, you know, and I've put customers on a couple of 32s in the summer. That fish that Owen caught, that 32 that Owen caught that thing was next level. I mean, I'm not, this kid's 17 years old. I wanted to strangle him. I've never caught a 32.
Yeah, that's a giant. Like,
Yeah.
most guys have never got one.
Oh yeah, it's just that it was an insane fish, and that was one of those days we actually ran out of bait. Like like we're all sitting on different reefs, like maybe a half mile to a mile, and I ran out of bait, and I thought, well, I'll just cruise over here and see what these pull up on the next guys, and yeah, we're all out of bait. I thought, holy moly, what's going on? So
Good problem to have.
it's a good problem to have. Yeah, yep.
So what are some of your favorite spoons that you're running for walleyes through the ice?
Well, I have always been a buckshot flutter spoon aficionado. The glass buckshots did really, really good for me last year. In blue, the blue silver one, and then the little bit golder perch one. Mm-hmm. Those were both absolute killers. And then when Sam came up, I don't know if he intentionally left me a pile of super glows or if I grabbed those when he wasn't looking. But from that trip on, I used a lot of the super glow stuff that wasn't available. And it was shocking how well it worked in our stained water. Yeah. I've never been a glow guy. Yeah. I've always kind of thought that's a waste of time. Because I never really noticed a difference with it. But boy, with that super glow, it made me a believer. And it's not like you have to glow it every 10 seconds. Right. I was having dead sticks get hit, with a super glow coffin spoon. Yeah. And, working with customers or whatever, and look back and my, my snare rod's just curled over. And so I kind of became a believer in glow because of the super glow. Before the super glow, I never glowed anything. Yeah.
Right.
So, did you use that super glow blue up there?
I do. Yeah. Do you
like it?
Yeah. Yeah. So blue, for me, if I could pick one color to fish rainy the rest of my life, it'd be blue, and it doesn't matter what bait. I love blue.
I think that blue is going to make a comeback every time we launch a blue something the pro staff always want, but the sales force never wants it because historically it's a poor selling color. It's always the first to get discontinued. But the past few years, I think, just with the amount of knowledge and stuff that's out there and what you guys can do on social media,
sure,
that blue is becoming a consumer favorite.
Okay.
And when we first came out with that super glow blue, I was a little hesitant. I was like, I don't know if it'll make it, but I think I've been hearing reports from consumers, pro staff. I think that super glow blue is going to be one to stay a long time.
And that thing is ridiculously bright.
Yeah, I think the blue is probably the third longest glowing out of the four colors.
Sure,
but it still glows.
Yeah, the blue one is impressive. I've been kind of telling people like that's the one that I like the most.
The sleeper that's going to be the best seller next year.
It'll be the sleeper this year.
Yeah. But I think it's getting a little bit more,
Use the word mainstream.
It's getting a little bit. No, I think the pro staff guys are, getting sick of blue getting, discontinued. Because they were kind of trying to keep it a secret.
Yeah.
And now guys are sharing it because they want to keep having blue for their personal use.
For sure.
So now, they're sharing that. But blue's always been kind of like a secret color
the secret tournament color that none of the pros want to talk about, and then they wonder why it gets discontinued.
Yeah.
That was Bro's case for the longest time, too.
Yeah, Bro did not talk about it for a while. And then he always begs me to get blue, and I said, we got to start pumping blue, and now he's always pumping blue. So it's catching up.
What happened to the blue? Well, you didn't tell anyone that it catches fish.
Sure.
Discontinued.
Because he's trying to keep it a secret is what he's trying to do. Yeah. Same with Donnie.
I keep no secrets. I do charge for them.
What's your craziest ice guiding story that's okay for the podcast?
Do you already know this story? Is that why you're smiling?
I don't. Well, I don't think I do.
So one with the auger?
No. Oh, that is a good story.
That's a good story.
But no, it's not as good as as good.
Okay.
So I have an Iranian doctor. and his buddy. And when he booked the trip, he was very, very adamant about a shore lunch. And I just don't do shore lunches when we're ice fishing. But I capitulated for some reason I'll never understand. And so we did pretty well in the morning. And I did shore, a ice shack lunch for these guys. And I guess part of it was I was probably thinking these guys will never have the chance again to taste fresh walleyes. I mean, we caught them they're an hour old.
Yeah.
And so the afternoon bite was awful. And this guy looks at me and he says, "I ride snowcat." And I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "I ride snowcat." And he's pointing at my Bearcat. And I was like, I don't know about this. So I fired it up and I said, "Look, it all looks the same. It's rocks and snow and pine trees. Stay where you can see the houses." And he jumps on the snowmobile. And I actually had my nephew Tucker with me that day. And I had him set up just in another hard-sided house fishing by himself, and I would kind of bump back and forth. Yeah. And so guy takes off, and he's just kind of putzing real slow, doing little figure eights and stuff. So I go in the shack and sit down next to his buddy, and we start BSing whatever. I grab a fishing rod and fish a little bit. And I don't know how much time went by, but it dawned on me that I could not hear the snowmobile anymore. So I poke my head out the door and kind of wildly look around, and I mean, this guy's nowhere to be seen. Yeah. And Tucker from 80 yards away said, "Uncle, he's gone." I said, "Yeah, I see that, buddy." So I'm like, dude, if you go the wrong way up there, yeah, you're going out, and the direction he went is there are no resorts, no cabins, no roads. It's wilderness for hundreds of miles. So I was like, oh my gosh. So I said, "Tucker, you come sit with this guy and I'm going to track him down." So I get on my other sled and I have to stay on his track. Yeah. And I found him 22 miles away, snowmobile out of gas, sitting on snowmobile crying.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I had to tow the snowmobile back. And so we get back, and I mean, I'm not a master of hiding my emotions. I think anybody that knows me can read me pretty well, so we get back, and Tucker had already warned this other fella, probably best if you don't say anything when my uncle comes back. So I get these guys, we get them back to the landing, and the guy, he needs me to send him an invoice to square up. He doesn't have any he didn't have cash, no check, no no card, no nothing, and so I forget what his total was like for the fishing, the shore lunch, the extra gas. I think it came to $390 or something. And so I told him, I said, "Well, this, the invoice is going to come through. I'm going to make it for $390." And he looked right at me and he goes, "Make it $400." Now, I think I held it together pretty good. But that nephew of mine he's 18 now. And sometimes he will just call me and I'll answer, "Oh, hey Tucker, what's going on?" And he'll just say, "Make it 400 and laugh and hang up. You little bugger. Yeah, that's probably and there's been some pretty wild ice fishing stories, but that one there is that's pretty top shelf.
Tell us about the auger too, if that's a good one.
Well, I believe I was taught to believe in the rule of duplicity. And the rule of duplicity is it only applies to ice fishing. And that is, if it's worth the effort to bring one, probably better bring two. And so when you go snowmobiling way out with customers, and break your auger before you can drill one hole, and the customers look at you and say, "What now?" And you say, "Trip's over." It's not a good look.
So now you bring 2 augers.
I bring, at least 2, if not 3. Yep, extra drills, extra batteries, extra blades, extra augers. I mean, it's different when you're guiding, you know. So the last thing you ever want to look like is you're unprepared or you didn't see the pitfall coming. Yeah. You know, it's people only have one of 2 reactions when they pay a fishing guide, and it's either I want to be your best friend or this guy is a crook. It seems as though there's no middle ground. So, you know, any little hiccup can just reflect negatively on you as a businessman. Yeah. So you just want to be prepared for that stuff. And you know, it was my lifetime buddy Zippy Piccadilly that taught me about the rule of duplicity, and it has come in handy.
That's a good story.
Well, I got tons of them. How much time we got?
Donnie, let people know about your ice business and how they can contact you.
So
if there's any open dates even.
Yeah, there are. So Rainy Lake Remote is the name of the winter business we're running, the Sherps. You can follow Rainy Lake Remote right on Facebook. You can message us directly from the Facebook page. You can follow me on Facebook, message me directly, or my partner in the winter business is a guy by the name of Joe Ronkin. You can message him directly. We both have remote access to the calendar. We can both take deposits, get you set up on the calendar, kind of run you through all the details of the trip. As far as availability, we do have some. We try to limit it. We can do groups from 1 to 12. 12 is pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
We try to limit each day to 8, you know, and that puts us in a good spot. If there's an emergency of some sort, we have the capacity to bring everybody back in one machine.
Yep.
But yeah, I probably following our Facebook page and messaging me directly through that is the best way to get a hold of me, if you don't already follow me.
And they can see all your big fish photos too.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we're a little slow getting going because we don't have any ice yet. But yeah, you can definitely scroll through some of last year's pictures and get a real good idea of what we're doing. You know, the quality of fish anyway is pretty superb.
Well, Donnie, thanks for coming on the show here. I think it was an awesome podcast, a ton of good stories out of you. I hope all the listeners made it to the end here. And yeah, we really appreciate you coming on.
We're going to have you again because I think you have more stories to tell.
Yeah, we've barely scratched the surface. So stories can also be heard in person, folks.
Captain Donnie, everybody.
Book a trip. You know where to find him.
Northland, fish and tackle, fisherman's favorite. It's a fisherman's favorite.